Okay, so now we're going to get on to the actual binding of the book. This is the tricky part, so make sure that you are paying full attention, and if you have any questions, make sure you're asking me along the way. So your first step is going to be to separate your book in half. It doesn't have to be perfectly in half. I'm just going to kind of feel the page thickness until it feels like about half. So you're going to split your book, and then you're going to start at one of the two middle holes of your book, and pushing through from the white drawing paper side with the cover away from you. I'm going to push through. And sometimes it can be hard because your holes might not line up exactly perfect, just like mine don't. And that's totally fine. We're not all perfect. So sometimes it's easier to kind of separate the pages as you go through until you can poke the needle all the way through all of your pages. So for this section, you're going to leave a tail of about a hand's length. So I'm just going to use my hand to measure and pull it through until I have about the length of my hand. Then I'm going to flip the book so it's back together again. And so my thread should be on the outside cover now. And your tail should be on the inside of your book, just like this. So it should be hanging out somewhere in the middle, again, about a hand's length, laying across your pages like that. And you're just going to forget about it for now. You want to make sure it's there, but don't worry about it. And so now my first step is that I'm going to wrap my thread around the back side of the book here. And I'm going to come back up through the same exact hole that I just went through. And again, sometimes it's easier to separate those pages as you push your needle through the book, like so. And now you're going to pull it tight. Not too tight that you're pulling the middle tail through, just tight enough that it's not really loose and flopping around. So your first stitch should look like this. Okay, so if everybody can please just like follow along with that first stitch, get that done, and then I'll show you the next stitch too. Okay, so the next section is you're going to go up to your next hole. So the one that's closest to the edge. So either if you started with this one, it would go this way. So this is the one closest to the edge. So that's the one I'm going to go to next. So I'm just going to bring it up to this hole. I'm going to go through the front again. And instead of going to the middle of the book, I'm going to go all the way through all of the pages. And again, my holes don't line up very well. Hopefully yours are lined up a little bit better than mine. I definitely was rushing so that you don't sit here forever watching me do this on YouTube. So then after you get it all the way through, I'm just going to pull it tight again. And now this time, because you already have this original stitch, you should be able to pull it even tighter. So I'm going to pull it tight. So now my front should look like this with a big L on it. And my back should still look like this with the thread coming down. So now your next step is you're going to go through again because you want it to look like this stitch. So I'm going to bring it around the back and come through the front again. And so after I get my needle through, I'm going to pull all the thread through and pull it tight. So you want to make sure you're pulling it tight at every stitch, so that way your binding is really nice and stiff and not loose. So now at this stage, you should have kind of like a rectangle looking shape and just 2 lines. So if anybody doesn't have this right now, either check in with a neighbor and ask for some help, or raise your hand so I know to come check in with you, and then we'll move on to the next stitch. So the next stitch, if we're looking at my example one that I already did, you'll notice that it covers the top here. That's so that the bottom pages don't like open up a lot. It holds it together a lot nicer. So we need to now get this top part. So on my book, my thread is coming out the bottom. So I'm going to do it the same way that I did on this side. I'm just going to loop it around the top. And I'm going to come back through the same hole for a 3rd time, except this time my thread is going on the top of the book instead of on the back of the book. So I'm going to pull it through, pull it tight, and now you have a rectangle and a square. And your back should still look like this, just 2 lines with a square. So now we're going to fix this blank side here by bringing our thread back up through this hole. So it's coming out this top hole. I'm going to just bring it back through this hole that we had already stitched through. And so these ones that you've already stitched through can sometimes be hard to press through because they already have thread through them. And so this is where your thimble can come in. Because if you press on the bottom of the needle with just your finger, it's going to really hurt. It's probably actually going to like go through your skin. So I like to use a thimble, and thimbles are slippery. So they do have these kind of dents in them. So what you do is you just kind of rest the tip of the needle in one of the dents so it doesn't slip around, and then you can press through, and that way you don't hurt your finger. Okay, so I'm going to pull it through again, pull it tight, and now it is the same on the front side and also the back side. So you've just found half your book. We're now going to do the same thing on the opposite side. And I'm also noticing that this part here is a little loose. And if I pull on this, it's not really doing much. So I'm actually going to go and open to where my tail is on the inside of my book. And I'm just going to pull it a little bit so that my initial starting point stitch right here is now tight. It's not all loose and sliding around. Okay, so our next stitch is that we're going to line our papers up. I'm going to go through the front of my other hole. So on this side, I'm just going to push through. And again, go all the way through to the bottom. And put it all the way through, like that. So now your front side should look like this, and your back side should look like this, with the thread coming out. So next, I need to get the stitch that goes across the back. So I'm going to bring it around and go back through the front here. So I'm bringing it back through the front, pressing all the way through. And then pulling it all the way through and pulling it tight as well. So now your front should look like this, and your back side should look like this. So if anybody is stuck or this doesn't look right, where your front is like this and the back side is like this, check in with somebody at your table that does have it looking like this, or raise your hand so I can come and kind of check in with you. Okay, so now your next stitch is you're going to look at the back side, and you're going to come across and go to your last hole, and you're going to press it up and all the way through to the front. I'm not doing a good job lining these ones up on this hole. Okay, so I'm going to pull it tight after I brought it all the way through. So now your front side should look like this, and your back side should look like this. Okay, so now we need to do the bind that goes all the way across. So I'm going to stitch it down like this, come in from the back, and push it up through the front. Oop. Wow, I did not do a good job lining up this hole, but that's okay. It'll still come out. It'll still come out right, even if it's not perfectly lined up. It just becomes a little more frustrating when you're actually doing the binding, but it will still be pretty even once you're done. So we'll go through and pull this tight. So now your front side should look like this with your loose thread, and your back side should look like this. So now we need to do the other side of this top corner. So we're going to bring it around so we make kind of a square in the corner here. And I'm going to come back up for a third time through the same hole, the one that I did a terrible job lining up. So bear with me. And I'm going to pull it through, making sure that my loop is going on the top. Okay, so now your back side, sorry, I should start with the front. So now your front side should look like this, and your back side should look like this. And so you'll notice that we have a blank spot here in the middle of our back side, and we have a blank line here on our front side. So we're going to come back through here to finish the front. So we'll bring the thread over and we're going to go through this hole here to finish that line. And I'm going to use my thimble because this is again pretty hard to push through. Pull it tight. So now your front side should look like this. It's done. And then your back side should still have this one space. So this is going to be our final stitch. And remember that little tail that we had in the middle that was just kind of hanging out? It's about hand's width or hand's length long. This guy. This is where it comes back into play. So you're going to find your little tail here, and you're just going to keep your hand in the same pages where the tail is, because on this last final stitch, you're not going to come all the way through the front. You are going to stop on the same place where your original tail is. So how I do that is I'm going to very carefully press into the hole with the needle, I'm going to separate these pages, and I'm going to very gently and carefully push through without going all the way through my front. So you can see that my needle has just emerged. I'm going to use my thimble again to press this through. And I'm just going to press it up until it's long enough for me to pull. Pull it through, just like that. I'm going to remove my needle now because you are done with the actual sewing part. So I'm just going to put that aside in a place where it won't lose it, so that way other people can use it. And now I'm going to pull both my tails so that I can make sure my stitching on my book is nice and tight. And you'll notice that one is like hecka long. So before you do anything else, I'm just going to cut both of these so they're even. Just make this next part easier for me. So right now this thread can all pull through. The book will eventually fall apart unless you tie these off. So you're just going to do a double knot. So that's like how you start when you're tying a shoe. So I'm just going to pull it through like this. Pull it tight. And then I'm going to do it again. So I'm just going to loop it under like that. Pull it tight. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to give these a haircut. So I'm not going to cut it too short. I'm also going to be careful not to cut any of the pages. And so you should just have like a tiny little knot that you can just barely see. And you can kind of tuck it into the pages if you'd like. And now you have your beautifully bound traditional Japanese style sew binding book. And so if you want, I like to do this. I like to just crease back my cover and do a nice crease there. And you are ready to decorate your cover.